Albert Einstein once said, "Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid." Assessment is an important part of the educational process when utilized correctly. However, far too many educators see assessment as only a way to judge a student's mastery of a concept and apply grades to their achievement. These judgments and grades play a major role in the motivation and learning of students. For this assignment, I took the time to observe students that were being assessed within their high school classroom. From the observation and conversation with the teacher, I was able to gain insight into the type of assessment used and form an opinion on whether or not it was an appropriate method of assessment for the desired outcome. For the observation, I went to Westview High School and sat in on an Algebra 2 classroom. This observation took place on Tuesday, April 11, 2017, from 10 a.m. until 10:40 a.m. The educator was Miranda Rhodes, a certified math teacher. The contact information she provided was a business email in which she can be reached at miranda.rhodes@tuhsd.org. The students I observed were participating in an assessment in which they would rotate through 8 stations that each had a different question. This was done with a peer in groups of 2. Each group, however, visited each of the 8 stations, and therefore everyone had the same questions for the assessment. The questions each had different concepts from the unit they were currently ending on probability. This was designed to be a portion of their review for the upcoming unit exam. Based on the conversation with Ms. Rhodes, I have concluded that this particular assessment that the students took part in was formative in nature. According to OPI and SAT, the results of formative assessments have a direct impact on the teaching materials and strategies employed immediately following the assessment. I was informed that the students took a quiz the day prior in which their results were subpar. The class average was at 37%. The Algebra 2 teaching team was originally planning on giving a review on Tuesday, followed by the unit exam on Wednesday. Because of the poor quiz scores, they decided to add in the station's assessment. This allowed them to push back the exam to Thursday so that the review could be centered around the concepts that needed the most attention based on the station's assessment. In other words, the assessment was guiding the instruction that would take place in the days following. Hall further describes that assessment is formative when learners use information from assessment to bridge the gap between what they can do and what they need to be able to do, or between what they know and what they need to know. I observed many students asking questions about specific concepts that they were unsure of on the quiz and that were reappearing in their station's assessment. They noticed the fact that they were seeing the same concepts, indicating that it was something important to know. Formative assessment might take the form of individual students reflecting on and assessing themselves against their previous performance or achievement. It could also take the form of peer assessment, where students are encouraged to judge the performance of peers and explain their reasons for their interpretations and judgments. As stated previously, it was evident that the students knew which concepts they were still unsure of, and therefore, they were asking questions to help bridge the gap. I also observed, however, that some peer groups were debating which type of probability each question was and how the particular problem should be solved. This included students providing their interpretation and reasoning behind their decisions, which provides a form of peer assessment. I agree with providing students another less formal formative assessment. The students were given a formative assessment the day prior in the form of a quiz. Based on the students' quiz scores, it was evident that a simple review that would be completed individually as homework would not provide the necessary means to allow students to perform better on their summative exam. The students had received their review the day prior with the anticipation of having their test on Wednesday. Only about 5 students had attempted to complete it on Tuesday when I was observing. Waiting to start it that night would not give the students any time to ask questions about concepts that they were unsure about. They would be left to try to figure things out for themselves. This would not allow them the opportunity to improve before the exam. This peer group assessment, on the other hand, allowed students the opportunity to discuss the problems with their peers. It allows them the opportunity to debate with other students and provide reasoning behind their thought processes. It also allows them to hear what other students have to say, which may help them to better understand the concepts. For example, I heard several instances where the students would ask the teacher a question like, "Would we be adding these probabilities or multiplying them because we want both events to happen together?" Although they are still questioning themselves, they were able to provide the reasoning behind why they thought the probabilities should be multiplied instead of added together. With these two back-to-back assessments, Ms. Rhodes could get a better understanding of students' strengths and weaknesses. According to OP and SAP, when getting a sense of student skills and knowledge, you must look for convergence from several sources of information. As indicated earlier, assessment can allow teachers to identify students' current strengths, and as a consequence, can help them avoid superfluous and wasteful instruction. This information would be able to guide what concepts were covered from the review on Wednesday. It would allow her to avoid the topics that were mostly understood, but cover those that the majority missed. Therefore, the students would be much more prepared for their upcoming exam. What I would suggest, in addition to the great work that Ms. Rhodes and the Algebra 2 team are doing at Westview High School, would be to implement diagnostic assessment prior to each unit. Diagnostic assessment can be used to help teachers differentiate instruction. OP and SAP describe the basic idea of differentiation is that the teacher finds out student needs and readiness before starting instruction so that they can use this information to tailor or differentiate, diversify instruction for them. These procedures are critical because of the wide range of student cultures, abilities, and needs in every classroom today. Far too often, teachers simply teach the curriculum without any idea of their students' strengths and weaknesses. Too much time is spent on the earlier concepts that should not take long to master, which does not leave enough time for the later concepts that need more time and devotion. Although formative assessments are being utilized in a productive manner to help bridge the gap in student knowledge, less time would need to be devoted to such assessment strategies if instruction was differentiated towards students' needs. For the probability lesson, students quickly grasp the initial concepts dealing with sets and simple probabilities. The teachers, however, spent as much time covering these concepts as they did the more difficult concepts of conditional probability and independent and dependent events. As a result, students have struggled with the latter. By using a diagnostic test prior to the lesson, they would have been able to see that very little time was needed on the initial concepts so that more time could have been spent later. This may have eliminated the need for the extra formative assessment that was observed on my visit to the classroom. Assessment is an essential part of the educational process within schools today. Although they have the potential to be extremely successful and effective, not using the appropriate assessment techniques also has the potential to do more harm than good. Within the classroom that I observed, the only method of assessment used regularly are formative and summative assessments, typically in the form of quizzes and exams. On the day of observation, the students participated in a different method of formative assessment in which they worked in groups to go through 8 different stations that had probability questions pertinent to the exam they would take later in the week. The formative assessment utilized during the observation allowed students the opportunity to close the gap between what they already mastered and what they needed to know prior to the end of the unit. Although these methods of assessment are necessary in the classroom, too much emphasis is placed on them. Summative exams are worth 50% and formative quizzes are worth 25%. I strongly believe that the use of diagnostic assessments would prove to be useful in their classroom to guide instruction and lead to higher student achievement. As Ignacio Estrada once said, "If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach the way that they learn."